Hi guys, Mike here at Royal Eclipse Productions, and welcome to my next video blog here on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who's been getting involved in the conversation, subscribing to me and following me. I've had some great conversations with people both here on YouTube and on Twitter. My Twitter my Twitter handle is at MWBellMusic. So please do ask me questions there or have a chat to me there, no problem at all. I'm quite active on the old Twitter platform. Some of you may be looking at this and thinking, why on earth are we looking at Logic Pro X or Logic Professional 10, as the full term would be? Apple do like their acronyms. That's for sure. There's a reason for it, basically, in that Pro Tools, it kind of slightly let me down. It failed to make me laugh. Let's put it that way. It's been slightly miserable for me over the past couple of months really with Pro Tools. If anyone kind of followed my previous videos with the screencasting that I was doing, you know, I bought Video Slave 2 and moved all the video out of Pro Tools. I got Vienna Ensemble Pro to kind of move samples out of Pro Tools. You know, and all these things, while slightly they helped, I was still getting a lot of problems, not just in terms of CPU, but pops and clicks and latency problems. All sorts of stuff was going on. Now, I love Pro Tools still. You know, it's been there the longest in terms of my use. I started with Pro Tools LE8, I believe. Back in the days when you used to have a Digi Design box, so I had an M-Box 2 running Pro Tools LE8. I had Logic Studio as well when I went to uni. That was kind of a prerequisite that you had to have for the course. And I was kind of became known as the guy who composes in Pro Tools. A lot of the guys found that quite strange. So hey, I've joined the club late. You know, 4 years on, I'm sitting here in Logic. I got to say, I'm loving the experience. It's been a bit of a learning curve. While I'm not kind of you know, completely unfamiliar with Logic. My track Maritime Discoveries, which some of you may have heard on Apple Music, that was basically compiled all in Logic from Found Sound. So there was no real MIDI, but there was definitely automation. And last year, Black Noir's Tales of the Unaffected was produced by myself in Logic Pro X, so I did all the mixing and the mastering and everything. In fact, no, the mastering was done in Pro Tools, but you know, the mixing was done in Logic, and there were MIDI stuff. Some of the samples the guys were using, I had kind of, you know, samples that would fit a little better into the tracks. So I did some sort of MIDI massaging, if you like, in Logic. So I've used it, but in terms of it being like a main DAW, and especially for film and to film, no, I've never used Logic before. So it's all been very new to me. So hey, we're in Logic. It seems to be running better. You know, let's have a look at the old activity monitor now. Bearing in mind I'm using OBS as well, which is actually using more than Logic at the moment to record this video, but I still have got 40% of my CPU remaining, you know, or 55 here. Pro Tools, I think the application manager, which sat at the top here, was causing a big problem. I mean, even idle at times, that was using 15% of your CPU. Now, if you've got a big old session on a film and you're kind of 15% is being lost by a plugin without Pro Tools even being launched, that's a bit of a problem. The concept's great. You know, I love the feeds in Application Manager. I love the fact that you could kind of update all your plugins and Pro Tools itself just from that one icon, but it just was too CPU intensive. You know, you could run Pro Tools with it shut, which I did as well, but I still was finding I was finding lots of problems with it. So I made the choice to go to Logic, and here we are. Anyway, so I digress from it. Yes, so a lot of the questions I've been getting on my channel lately are with regards to my template that I put up back in Pro Tools, where I was talking about how I use VE Pro. So you'll have basically, you know, an input here with 16 channels, basically a multi-out, but coming out of VE Pro. So that's great, but one problem that I experienced myself and a lot of people were asking me about, say you've got like a soloist stem here. So, you know, soloists to me are solo players, of course, but they're elements that I like to mix a lot drier in terms of reverb. I like them quite close in terms of the room. They're the closest to where the audience would be standing, whereas, you know, the rest of the orchestra to me goes a little further back, you know, obviously as it normally would work. So instead of having, say, a solo violin or a solo cello going into a string stem, I personally keep them in soloists because I want that control to bring them closer. You know, I want to maybe, you know, not have such a wider stereo spread, for instance, on them. You know, bring the actual field a lot closer to the track. They're my foreground instruments. So say we put, you know, a delay or some sort of crazy effect on, you know, you want to put that on the piano, for instance. Now, one way you could do it would be to go over to Contact. I will explain these mixers, by the way, guys. This is gonna, I'm just showing you it for now, but I will go into it. Say we open up Strings Native Instruments here. It brings open this patch. Now, what I was doing was going over to Micog and basically adding effects from here. So I was adding, you know, distortion or, you know, compression or limiting or anything, you know, that I kind of wanted to do delays within Contact. So that was a way I was basically mixing my elements that would then all return back into my DAW. And for me, they go back to the kind of the instrument track, which had your instance of VE Pro, but they'd essentially all stem out to the end here, and that's where they go to soloists. So that's my kind of my end stem. You know, I've got a stem for all these different elements that I use within my scores. Now, that's fine, but if you've got a plugin that you want to use that's like a third-party plugin, for instance, something that's not actually within Contact, you can use it, but it's going to apply it. You know, if you go ahead and put, say, a delay on this soloist stem, it's going to apply these effects to absolutely every single instrument that comes through it. So where if you've got some crazy piano with a weird delay on there, you might not want that to go onto a violin or to a cello. So it caused people a little bit of a problem. So I've kind of found a little bit of a solution to it. What people didn't want, if we come back over to Logic, they didn't want to have like their 16 multi-outs, as well as their MIDI tracks, because you're basically doubling up your track count. You know, suddenly, you know, 10 inputs becomes 20 because you've got one instance, one kind of MIDI track going into either Contact Standalone or VE Pro, and then you've got one coming back again. And that kind of, I could see, it was causing me a problem, and I can see why people wouldn't want that. I mean, this is already a fairly big session, and I got stuff minimized, which I'm loving as well in Logic. You couldn't do this in Pro Tools. We couldn't just say, no, brass, go away. So yeah, what I've chosen to do is basically use MIDI ports. So if we go into the environment for a second, and this window it was literally a headache to set this up. Get in touch with me on Twitter if you want some more information about it, and we'll sort it out. It was a little bit of a headache, but basically what I've got is two instrument tracks. So that's VE Pro 1 and VE Pro 2. VE Pro 1 is my local samples, VE Pro 2 is my samples on my Mac Mini going over LAN. And then within these there are 16 ports on each, basically. So of those 16, you've then got 16 channels you can use. So port 1 is basically my soloists. So if I come over here, that's my solo stem here, which is sub 1. So that's my kind of my sum of tracks. You know, in Logic you've got that way you can, the track stack, if you like, that they implemented with Pro X, which I love. That's how we kind of can maximize and minimize these tracks. So yeah, these are all my my MIDI ports: MP1, MP2, MP3, MIDI port 1, MIDI port 2, MIDI port 3. Which, if I take you briefly over to the mixer, those are customized here. So where we've got 1, that's MIDI port 1. Where we've got 2, that's MIDI port 2, and so on and so forth. You can also, if you bring up the actual plugin, it's at the very top here as well. You know, you can have up to like 48, which is just crazy. That's another thing as well, guys. Make sure you've turned that on. So if you go to the preferences in your Vienna Ensemble Pro, under instances, you've got to make sure that you've put these track counts up 48, 32, and 32, both within your VE Pro server and over in Logic or Pro Tools, whatever it is that you're using, on your actual instance. So I'm going to bring this up. If you go to preferences here as well, you get the same thing, 32, 48, 32. Make sure that's set. But yeah, so what you're doing is, as opposed to, if I bring up this window here, let's take you back over to the mixer quickly so we can see everything. As opposed to before, where I basically would have, you know, soloist, strings, brass, percussion as individual VE Pro instances. I've now got one instance with everything loaded within that one plugin, which is great because actually coming across from Pro Tools to Logic, I didn't really have to load anything again. My key instruments were already there, saved within this kind of instance. So moving between DAWs is kind of not really a problem anymore, so long as your base setup is the same. And when I mean base setup, you know, I'm talking about your, in our case here, our environment of these tracks working together. So what that means in terms of mixing, and you know, I hope this is kind of making sense. This was literally about, I've probably spent about 20 hours setting this up. It was a little bit of a task, especially coming across to a brand new DAW and then going in and trying to configure it how I kind of wanted it with MIDI ports. You know, MIDI ports I was using in Pro Tools as well. So what happens now is, say we've got our soloist track. Yeah, let's take the soloist as an example. At the moment, I'm only using the Tina Grow legato patch from Cine Samples and the Quantum Leap solo violin track from East West. So we can play both of these. They play no problem. So what you can do is, if we take you back over to this mixer here, so I've chosen at the moment to customize the Logic mixer at the bottom and VE Pro at the top. This is my instance where VE Pro is connected. This is my return for strings and solo. So soloists and strings are returning in here, and then they're bussing back out to 3 and 2. So bus 3 is for my strings and bus 2 is for my soloists, which go to the end of the session like I've demonstrated before. That's kind of my workflows right at the end. These are my final stems where I apply kind of any kind of it's like my final balance. When I get to the end, that's where I mix everything together, and that's where I'll bounce the individual stems of each individual part of the track. But what we've basically got, if I take, so VE Pro 1, or VE1, and then 1/1, that basically means it's Vienna Ensemble instance 1, which is on my local machine. So if I take you back quickly over to the door, that's basically that. This is all these tracks here with VE Pro 1 are this instance of Contact, and then anything with VEP2 is anything that's on the Mac Mini. So where I've got 1.1, that means MIDI port 1, MIDI channel 1, and that is then reflected within my mixer here. So that is basically the Tina Grow library. If I play it, and this is going to be your Quantum Leap solo violin. If you'll notice, the audio is coming here for the solo violin. So, you know, MIDI channel 1, and then we've got solo, MIDI channel 2, and then we've got solo 2. They correspond to each other. And then, you know, for the Tina Grow, that's coming out of solo 1. So MIDI channel 1, solo 1. So, okay, sure, people could argue at this point, well, hang on, Mike, you've duplicated the whole mixing process in a different way. You know, why is that any different to routing an aux channel back in Logic or Pro Tools? Well, I don't want a massive great track count, you know, 16 tracks plus another, 16 MIDI tracks plus 16 aux tracks back. I don't want that. So what I've got is I've still got a return in Logic for all my strings, and I've got a return for all my solo instruments. So, you know, if you've got all of your stuff basically is being routed back here, which then in turn goes to your end stem. But it just means we're applying effects outside of Logic. So you can almost think of Logic as that's all you're interested in when you're looking at your sequencer page, is your composition, your MIDI, your automation in terms of your, you know, affecting those sample libraries, whereas all your actual mixing is done really within VE Pro in terms of your general balance and perhaps add in some crazy effects. Here, for instance, I've added a Quantum Leap instance, Quantum Leap spaces to the solo violin, and I've done that before it's even come back into Logic. You know, so I wanted to be able to do that. Now, if you didn't have VE Pro, you wouldn't be able to do that because you wouldn't be able to add a Quantum Leap Spaces plugin within Contact. You'd have to add, you know, a stereo channel out of Contact back into Logic on its own separate channel, and then put the effect from there. So this is kind of the solution that I've come to, and really to configure it, you know, all you've got to do is at the bottom here, if we go all the way down, this is in VE Pro, you've got audio input channels and you've got buses. So adding buses and adding audio input channels. So these here are audio input channels. You're choosing at the top your in. So in this case, this is a solo 1, so that's the Tina Guo. So that is coming from Soloist's NI, which is Native Instruments, and it's coming out on channel 2. If I open up the Soloist Native Instruments here we've got our Tina Guo library. If I look here, MIDI channel 1, output 1. At this point, it might be worth me mentioning the whole, you know, you've got to set up Contact to kind of to send these channels out in the way that you want. So if I go to my, I'm going to zoom in here a sec so you can actually see what's going on. But if I go to my output, at the bottom here is what I've configured. So 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, etc, etc, all your multi-outs, which you can configure within VE Pro. So all you really do is hit Add Channels, choose your quantity. So in our case, you want 16 or less. Some of mine for drones and things to the Mac Mini, I've only got 5. I didn't really feel like I need more than 5 drones within a track. And then your sound card host output, so 2 channels, so stereo, 16. Choose the second one, so ST2 is your first one. The main reason is that 1 and 2 are kind of reserved by Contact's main host. So you're going to be starting everything really from your second, from 3 and 4 as opposed to 1 and 2. Just leave those 1 and 2 alone. That's your main output. So just choose that basically. I personally you've got to click this, delete existing channels before you create new ones, and make it your default configuration. You're never going to have to do it again. If you screw it up completely, don't worry about it. You can come back here, you can click in your outputs, and you can literally reset the entire thing back to default, basically. But you've got to do that so that, you know, in your output here now, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, etc, etc, down to 16, you know, so that as you add your plugins, those are gonna keep sorry, I turned my browser off there. So if I go into, say, let's bring up strings because it's got more loaded. It's a better example. So yeah, output channel of 3 and 4 from 1, input MIDI channel 1. That's wrong. That should be there. But yeah, so then 2, 3, etc, etc, and they match up in here basically. So where you're choosing, where we just work with strings, for instance, you know. If I go along to the end here. So I haven't actually organised this very well, have I, guys? This is literally me just getting going with this. So yeah, strings 1. So strings 1, that is going to be, if I go back to Logic, and I'm going to come into my strings, which are here. Strings 1 is Evo Grid from Spitfire. 2 is Albion, and then we've got Metropolis Arc in the mix as well. So when I go back to the mixer view, I know that basically number 1 here is going to be my Evo Grid. Number 2 is going to be Albion 1, and then we've got Metropolis Arc as well. So, and again, you know, if I bring up my mixer, that is highlighted in Logic as well. So now I need to go across to strings, which are here. So now I've got those ones I want. There's Evo Grid. It's coming in here. You know, this is going to be Albion, number 2, and this bad boy is going to be Metropolis Arc. Sorry about that. I got my my Nano Control 2 was slightly not configured in the way I wanted it to for that. But yeah, so this is what I'm saying. You're doing your mixing in this window. You can apply. You can do panning. You know, here you can use this stereo. You can use the stereo pan. You can adjust the volume. You can even mute and solo, which again is another thing I love with Logic. Wherever you solo, it actually solos that whole thing. You know, as opposed to before, I had to set in Pro Tools certain things to remain soloed, or you wouldn't hear anything. You can add any plugins that you've got on the machine. You know, Fab Filter, for instance, which I actually need to buy because my trial ran out and I really like it. Yeah, you know, you can then apply and you can mix that that plugin straight in VE Pro, and there's no problem in doing that, I don't think. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of using Logic Pro X. I'm going to play you through actually what I've been doing. I suppose it might be good to get some music in here. It's been a short film that I'm doing called Day One, which has basically been designed to kind of raise awareness for mental health. So the track's kind of quite sad, but it's got an uplifting sense to it as well. I'm going to shut up for a second and just play this for you. Yeah, that's kind of where I got to. So only very short so far. Literally well, I've had to deal with all this, setting this up, and getting this going. So you know, it's been kind of music, and then why isn't that working, and then music, and then why isn't that working? It's been interesting, but I hope that was kind of useful. I realise it's incredibly complex, especially this environment view. It broke me, to say the least. You know, and it was a long time to figure it all out. But I got there, and it's working, and it's not crashing, and it's not popping, and it's not clicking. So, you know, I'm happy with that. And generally speaking, it's you know, Pro X has been a good experience so far. So, please do add any kind of any comments about this. Obviously, me being new to Logic, anything you think I should check out, any plugins within Logic that you think are cool that I may not have used. Or just anything about this setup that you think could maybe be improved or could be better. I'm all ears. So yeah, there you go. That's my overview of using VE Pro in Logic, setting it up using MIDI ports as opposed to individual kind of elements within Logic. Yeah, and sending everything back in and working. So yeah, I'm gonna basically leave you guys to it. I hope to see you soon in the next video, where we're hopefully going to get straight back into more the music side of things rather than setup. But setup has been a little the bane of my life over the past a few months. To round off, you know, 25th, I may be winning the best score at the Views of the World Film and Music Festival in Montreal. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. Thank you to everyone for all the support and the continued support. And yeah, I will see you soon. Take care, guys. Bye bye.